Yeah, I asked the question just now. There was an Iman Chomil just now. It's gone now. Because I never noticed an Iman Chomil before in the group. Because this group is an open group. Yeah. So I'm just wondering whether somebody else from outside of the class is joining us. But okay. Either it's gone, she's gone, or she has changed her name. That's okay. Okay, so if there are no questions, let's just before we go to the presentation, I just put up the presentation. I think last night. That is presentation number 5, if I'm not mistaken, and it's about product and process and skills. Teaching of grammar as product, process, and as skill. Okay, and I think so far, the mid-sem test, I think was very easy. Personally, I thought that it was very easy, especially since you were able to look up your references, whatever references that you have. Um, and I expected many more to score full marks. There were only 2 with full marks. And the average was like, I think about 8 something. So if you had lower than 8, um, I think either you have not organized your materials well enough for you to refer to them, or you have not been attending, or something like that. I had one who did not submit, yeah. So I don't see him here also. Um, so I would like, if possible, to get a reason why taking the test should not be a problem. Yeah. Okay. So let me share screen. Okay, today we're going to look at teaching grammar as product, process, and skill. Yeah. So this is from Blackstone. The book is still in my car. Book is still in my car. Maybe next week and Wednesday I'll try to bring it up and show it to you. Okay. So anyway, this is from Rob Blackstone, 1994. I like this 3 approaches to teaching grammar simply because they are very kind of like comprehensive. You're looking at grammar from many different perspectives. Okay, so this is what it means: teaching grammar as product, teaching grammar as process, and teaching grammar as skill. So if you teach grammar as product, what you're trying to do is you're trying to emphasize on the form, right? The form, the grammar form. You're trying to focus. We're trying to emphasize that. Yeah. So that's teaching grammar as product. And teaching grammar as process, you include all the intricacies of real-time communication of the language. And although there are 3 different approaches here, it doesn't, what Blackstone is trying to say is he is not trying to say, oh, you have to choose one of the 3, because he actually feels that all 3 are interconnected, and you may need to have to actually be teaching all 3 to your students, something like that. Okay, so teaching grammar as product, teaching grammar as process, and teaching grammar as skill. Skill is, well, Blackstone describes it as striking a balance between product and process. It's the kind of skill that you need to move from recognizing the formal parts of the grammar or language system to from moving from there to actually using it when you communicate. So you need some form of skill to do that. Yeah. Okay. So that's why he has three different approaches or emphasis maybe. Okay. Teaching grammar as product, process, and skill. So for today, we're going to focus on teaching grammar as product. Yeah, which is the first. And actually, this is the more common way of teaching grammar, right? Because it focuses on the formal properties of the language, which is the grammar system and the grammar points and the grammar structures. Okay, so the main characteristics of teaching grammar as product are number one, noticing the main processes lah. Yeah, number one, noticing, and number two, structuring. Okay, and this discussion or this presentation, what I'm going to talk about is based on this. You know, this is the outline more or less. We have noticing for the learner, noticing by the learner, and then you have structuring for the learner and structuring by the learner, and the benefits of product teaching and the limitations of product teaching. Okay, so this we already kind of like discussed and agreed on, yeah, in some ways. Okay, before anything else, students need to notice the language or the language structures and language forms. Yeah, in order for them to pick up the language, understand the grammar, they need to notice the grammar. Okay, so kind of like if you're learning a second language or something like that, or a foreign language, you know, I don't know what languages are you taking. What languages is the whole group taking? The same language or a different third language? What language are you taking?
Thailand.
Either French or Thai.
Thai.
French or
Thai,
Thai?
French or Thai.
สวัสดีค่ะ
Yeah, Thai is quite difficult, right? Yeah, because
It's
it's got
easier than French.
easier than French. Oh, okay, I don't know.
Not for me. Never gotten an A before.
Yeah, okay, because it's got a different writing system. Yeah, but anyway, if you're learning a third language, foreign language like that, the first thing that you need to really kind of like uh, grasp is how does it work, you know, what are the forms. Yeah, so you have to notice this. Okay, if you don't notice it, it's not going to work, right? So that's the very first thing. Okay, so before anything else, students need to notice the language structures and forms. If you're learning Thai, you need to notice that you know, several things related to it. Yeah, I don't know Thai, I don't know French also, so I cannot give examples. Yeah, okay, so you need to notice these forms. Yeah, if you're learning Arabic, for example, you need to notice that there is a main word, and it, you know, there's other things that you add to it, and so on and so forth. Okay, so if our aim is to help them notice, then we should consider just that. So this is the initial, very initial part of learning grammar. Yeah? The emphasis is getting them to notice the grammar that is important in the language. Okay, and what Bedstone is trying to say is, if you are looking at the teaching grammar as product, then this is what it does. It's trying to get the students to notice. Okay, should not overwhelm the students at this stage. Okay, so in other words, we are aware of what we are doing. The first thing that we do is we get them to try to notice. We don't try to get them to use it at all, you know, that much. Okay, maybe they want to say it fine, but they don't really use it in actual language forms. This is his very best plan, but does have some push them into the deep end and get them to kind of like use it immediately in real life kind of situations. Okay. How it is working. Okay. So we really if they say, if a teacher say something else, they will say something else, etc., etc. Okay, we need to let go, yeah, eventually. So, purpose of noticing activities is to make a certain form salient and no more than that. Okay, was there a question? Myra, were you asking a question? No? Okay.
No, no, no.
So, the purpose of noticing activities is to make a certain form salient. Salient means more prominent. Yeah? People can notice it. Yeah, and no more than that, meaning to say, we should not go beyond that too much. Go a little bit, okay, but don't overwhelm them with some other things. Okay, so when you look at this extract, this is grammar, simple past and past progressive. Study the examples. This is extract 1 and this is extract 2. Okay, so you'll find that both of these are teaching grammar as product, because they're not focusing so much on using the language, but they're giving examples to kind of like, as an example to a certain kind of grammar structure. In this case, simple past and past progressive. So here, okay, just when I was trying to finish some work, Janet turned up. Okay, I was getting ready to come home and the phone rang. Okay, so they're kind of like, there's no explanation here. Okay, there's no explanation here. Yeah, so the student, when he looks at this or when she looks at this, she has to try to kind of make some kind of conclusion with respect to what's happening here. Okay, so simple past and past progressive, maybe the teacher will explain a little bit. Okay, this is simple past, this is past progressive. Okay, there is a difference, right? Looking at the difference. Okay, I was getting ready to come home and the phone rang. Yeah, okay, so extract number 1. Extract number 2 is also teaching grammar as product, but it includes a little bit more explanation. But it's still teaching grammar as product, and it's still, the students having to make sense of it, but not as much as this. Okay, it's more instructions provided. Okay, active and editor chooses the lead stories. Passive, the lead stories are chosen by an editor. Examples. Okay, then they give example of the passive is used a lot when you describe a process. Consists of this, and for you to change from tense of the verb, to change the tense, you change the tense of the verb to be. Okay, so this cartoon was drawn by Justin. These cartoons were, just some examples like that. Okay, so in the end, the teacher doesn't really have to try to stand in front of the classroom and try to explain grammar too much. Okay, we don't want that as well. Yeah? We don't want the teacher spending like 20-30 minutes just talking about grammar. Yeah, just talking about how the language works, how the grammar structure works. Okay, we have to rely also on the students trying to make sense of things. Okay, but regardless, these are both examples of teaching grammar as product, because the focus is on the form, yeah, the product, yeah, which is the form, the structure of the language. Okay, so helping students notice can be done explicitly or implicitly. Okay, if it is done explicitly, it is more noticing. for the learner if it is done explicitly. Okay, so we tell them, so we're telling them explicitly, please take note of this. Okay, please take note of the fact that passives have got can have a by phrase. That's noticing for the learner. Whereas if it is implicitly, it is more noticing by the learner. So you can have, for example, materials, and you can have the by phrase underlined, for example. Okay, you don't talk too much about it, and you hope that they will pay some attention to the fact that you have underlined the by phrase. Okay, you know what I mean, yeah? By phrase. The ball was kicked by Ahmad. That's the by phrase. Okay, so it can be done explicitly. If it is done explicitly, noticing is done for the learner. If it is done implicitly, noticing is by the learner. The learner has to, eventually, the learner will still have to notice, but the way you have designed the lesson, here it is explicit for the learner. Here it is implicit by the learner. Okay, both are not absolutes, and there are degrees of explicitness and implicitness. Okay, so what I'm saying by not absolutes means that they form one continuum. Okay, and they're not right at the end only. Okay, explicit at one end, implicit at one end. Okay, they're not only at the ends, they can be somewhere in the middle, they can be more towards explicit and things like that. You can have something which is very explicit and something which is not as explicit, but they are still noticing for the learner. Whereas if it is implicit, then you're relying on the students, and you're relying on your design of materials or task or whatever. Okay, teachers have considerable choice in how far we ask students to work things out for themselves through leading questions and other forms of guidance. Okay, so this is where the teacher comes in. Yeah. Okay, so it's got, teacher can of course teach it explicitly, but I don't think that good teachers will do that all the time. I think good teachers will vary depending on the class mood, depending on the lesson, depending on the structure. Some things can be very explicit because they're very straightforward. Some things can be more implicit because it may be a little bit more complicated if you try to explain it explicitly. Okay, so this is noticing for and noticing by the learner. Okay, and this is part of teaching grammar as product. Okay, take a look at this. Read it for a while. Okay, I'm not going to read it and get tired. This is an activity, old activity, 1986, from an old workbook. And tell me whether you think this is noticing for or by the learner. How explicit is it? What is it trying to teach? What structure is it trying to teach? Okay, first question, what structure is it trying to teach?
For structure.
Sorry?
It's
You'll
for.
find it in the grammar question. What is he trying to teach?
Conjunctions.
Conjunctions.
Oh, wait, past tense.
Is it present perfect tense?
Yes. Okay, present. I have worked. Okay, have is present. Have worked is perfect, right? So present perfect tense. and also past tense, simple past tense. Okay, so basically he's trying to make a contrast between present perfect tense, which is something that happened in the past, with past tense, simple past tense. Okay, something that happened in the past also. Okay, so that's the structure that this material, this activity is trying to teach. Is it explicit or is it implicit?
Implicit.
Right, it's implicit, right?
Implicit.
It's implicit. There are no instructions, there is no explanation of what present perfect tense is, no explanation of what simple past tense is, right? So it's implicit. Now, is it implicit noticing by the learner or noticing for the learner?
By the learners.
Right. This is noticing by the learner. Okay. You're requiring the students to notice. Okay. This. Yeah. Without you providing explicit kind of, you know, description of what present perfect is and what simple past is. Okay. Of course, this is not completely implicit, right? It's somewhere, but it's quite close to the end of that continuum. Okay, it's closer to the implicit end. Okay, but it's not right at the end. It's close to it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because it's got some leading questions here. These are the leading questions that actually get them to answer. Okay. So explain why Mr. Wigmore says I worked for the bus company for 5 years, but I worked for a chain of hotels. What is your answer? Well, there are leading questions there also. Is he still area sales manager for the bus company? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Right? Yes. Okay. I've worked for the bus company for 5 years. Yeah. So even if you don't read this, okay, who do you work for now, Mr. Whitmore, the National Bus Company? Okay, and if you just say, if you just read this, I worked for them for 5 years because he used have worked, it shows that here he's still working there. Okay, okay, I've worked at UPM, okay, for 30 years. That means you're still working there. Okay, so, if you say something like that. But if you say I worked for UPM for 30 years, that means you're not with UPM anymore. You're with somebody, you're either retired or you're working somewhere else. Okay, I worked for UPM for 30 years. It's in the past, finished. There's an end. Okay, I have worked for UPM for 30 years means that there's still, you know, you're still there. Okay, I work. I probably work some more years. Okay, but you know, something like that. Yeah. Does he still work for a chain of hotels? Okay. I worked for a chain of hotels. No, he doesn't. Right. Okay. So that's the difference. Yeah. Without really having to explain. Okay. By the student answering this and this, these two questions, the student will should be able to tell the difference between these two. Yeah. So this is implicit teaching, not explicit. Okay. So what is important here is the design of the activity. Okay. If you can design an activity that takes this into consideration, okay, then it's supposed, well, it's going to help, yeah, we think it's going to help the students realize, okay, the difference between these two, okay, between present perfect and also simple past. Okay, and this is once again implicit, noticing for the sorry, noticing by the students. Okay. What about this one? Okay, it's trying to teach simple past and past progressive, right? different book, different reference, 1984. Okay, activity 2. Okay, study these examples. Mary arrived at 6 o'clock and John was waiting for her. Bob was climbing a tree when he fell. Okay, when he went out, it was raining, and so on and so forth. Okay, and B, now place the above numbers in the appropriate list. The first two have been done for you. Okay, number 1, complete actions. Mary arrived at 6 o'clock is A. Okay, incomplete or interrupted actions. B, John was waiting for her. Okay, so when the student does this, complete section B, what is he going to get in 1A? What is he going to get in 1B? What kind of,
Independent,
what complete
dependent,
actions? Yes, yeah, go ahead.
independent and dependent clauses or sentences. Wait, is it correct?
They're both independent actually. They're
Oh yeah,
both
sorry, independent, sorry.
right. Okay. So no, actually they're looking at this, right? It's past and past progressive, right? Okay. So when they do B, all the past, all the past tenses, simple past tense, will be under complete
B
action.
and A.
Yeah. So for number 2 is going to be to be, right? For number 3, it's going to be 3A. For number 4, it's going to be 4B, and so on. And all the incomplete or interrupted actions are going to be under, all the past progressive are going to be under incomplete or interrupted actions. Okay. So when they have done that, they should realize that simple past, complete action, they look at all the list, they find, oh, all used, arrived, fell, went, broke, barked. Yeah. So they will notice that all these sentences with all these verbs in these forms are all complete actions. Whereas all the ones that have got a being, in front of it, an auxiliary in front of it, like was climbing, was eating, was raining, etc., they all fall under incomplete and interrupted actions. So then they will know, okay, now past progressive means incomplete and interrupted actions. Okay, so they've got this and they are noticing that they should be noticing the difference between the two. Okay, one is complete action, the other is incomplete interrupted actions. And okay, once again, is this implicit or explicit?
Explicit.
Can it be both?
Okay, it's more
Because
explicit than the first one, but it's still
can it be
implicit.
both?
Okay, it's more explicit than the other one. Okay, but it's probably more implicit, still implicit, but it's more explicit than this one. Okay, so remember I said we're talking about a continua, right? Okay, continuum. Okay, so this one is closer to this end. This one is still probably, at this end, but further away. Okay, because it's still implicit, but not as implicit as this one. Okay, yeah, it's not as implicit as this one. Okay, because it does use things like complex actions, incomplete interrupted actions, explanations like this. Okay, so it could be maybe in the middle or something like that. Yeah. Okay, so once again, the point is there's a lot of options, yeah, that we can do when we teach grammar, not just try to teach everything by telling them what the rules are, just like that, and expect them to memorize and understand. Okay. Okay. So The discovery of regularities, this is a comment from, this is a quotation from Sherwood Smith, also kind of old, but still practiced or thought about. Yeah? The discovery of regularities in the target language, whether blindly intuitive or conscious, or coming in between these two extremes. Okay? Intuitive is implicit, right? Conscious, probably a little bit more explicit, will always be self-discovery. Okay, the question is to what extent that discovery is guided by the teacher. Yeah, so this is where, as we mentioned many times, yeah, the teacher's role now has changed. It's not the teacher standing in front all the time and just telling the students what to do, what's right, what's wrong, etc., etc. It's getting the students to realize what is right and what is wrong. Okay, how to say this and how not to say this. Okay. The guidance where consciousness raising is involved, yeah, getting, raising this consciousness, can be more or less direct, okay, or explicit. Okay, more explicit or less explicit, more direct or less direct. The same, yeah, direct and explicit is the same. Okay. So if it is less direct, maybe it's more. I mean, if it's more direct, sorry, if it is less direct, maybe it's more indirect. If it is less explicit, maybe it's more implicit. Okay, just the way that he cited it. Okay, so things to remember about noticing. Number one, we cannot force the learners to notice. Okay, we can't do something and just tell them, notice this. You have to notice this. Why don't you notice this? Noticing is something that they do on their own. Yeah, in some way. Okay. So sometimes what helps noticing will be effective filter and maybe a little bit of time and things like that. Okay. So noticing will occur when they are ready. So you have to prep them up. You have to make them ready. Okay. That's why you have set induction and various other things to make them prepared. Okay. Consciousness raising activities can guide students to make own discoveries about grammar. So these kinds of activities, these are all also called noticing, and consciousness raising is basically the same thing. Yeah, maybe from a theoretical or technical point of view, there is some differences, but it's basically the same thing. Okay, students need opportunities for noticing and re-noticing. Okay, so in other words, this one activity may not be sufficient. Okay, you may need to have some other activities dealing with the same kind of grammar point, but doesn't have to be immediately after. Can be like 2 weeks after, 3 weeks after, 4 weeks after, maybe even whole month after. Okay, but the same grammar point is also being addressed in some way. Okay, so to give them re-noticing. These activities are in advance of activities which call for more active manipulation of grammar forms. So this point here is about the other grammar approaches or teaching grammar approaches that are here. Teaching grammar as process and teaching grammar as skill. Okay, but before anything else, we need the students to notice. Yeah, to notice the fact that there is simple past tense, present perfect tense. They have to notice how it's being used. So any questions at this point?
So far, no, Doctor.
Any
Everything's clear.
comments? Comments? Can follow, right?
Yes.
I hope. Yeah. Okay. So if we go back to the very first slide, okay, this one, we have covered this noticing. Okay. Now we know what is noticing, and we know the difference between noticing for and noticing by the learner. Okay. So the question now is it enough to have noticing? Just noticing. It's not enough, right? Is it enough to just notice that, oh, okay, I notice now why worked or how work is used, and I notice now how have worked is used. Okay, I notice now how have work is used. I notice how work is used. Is that enough? The answer is no, because you need to get them to, in some ways, manipulate it. Okay, they have to use it in some way, not necessarily use it in actual conversations or interaction, which is very demanding, but some form of practice. Okay, so noticing the grammar is not enough. It's a necessary condition, but not sufficient. It's like input. Okay, necessary but not sufficient. If only noticing activities, even notice structures, may not be remembered or acquired. Okay, so even if you do just this kind of activities, okay, okay, if all your activities are just like this, yeah, you know, they may notice, but after a while they may forget, you know. So you need something more, and this is where structuring comes in. Okay, good. Yeah, students need to do something with the grammar, so they have to act on it. Okay, they have to do something with it. Yeah. So this is an example. This is taken once again from Bedstone's book. Yeah, just like the other two activities, also from Bedstone's book, where he is trying to explain certain concepts. So here, invitations. Okay, would you like to go out? Yes, I'd love to. Okay, and then you work in pairs. You're kind of like practicing. Um, you know, would you like to? Okay, that phrase. Okay, so you notice maybe that phrase is the kind of phrase that you would use when you want to invite someone. Would you like to? Okay, so you notice that. Okay, you understand that. Now you want to practice it. Okay, you have to practice it. If you don't practice it or you don't structure it in some way, okay, then you're going to forget it. Okay, so work in pairs, invite your partner to do the following. Would you like to come to lunch? Would you like to come to my house? Would you like to play tennis? Would you like to go to a club, etc., etc., etc.? Okay, yeah. So this gives you a little bit of practice. You're kind of like structuring it because you're practicing it. You're trying to build it into your developing language system. Okay. So now you want to go to a pop concert one evening next week and you want someone to go with you. Once again, this is Western example. Yeah. Okay. I don't want to encourage anybody to go to pop concert. Just using this. Okay. You are free on 3 evenings only. Decide which evenings. Go around the class with your diary and find someone to go to the pop concert with you. Okay. So you decide on which dates. Okay. And you ask an answer like this. Yeah, would you like to come with me, or would you like to go to a pop concert, etc., etc. But the point is, they are using it. They're structuring the language. They're trying to use the phrase that they have noticed and trying to practice it and use it so that they can build it into their developing system. Okay. So this is kind of like very kind of traditional also, yeah, the traditional way of teaching in some ways. Okay, but here they're trying to put some sort of context as well. But it's not completely realistic. Yeah, it's not completely realistic because there's a lot of guidance provided. Okay, lots of structures provided. Okay, it's not real language yet. Yeah. So structuring for the learner. Okay, there was noticing for the learner. Now we also have structuring for the learner. Sometimes we need an activity where we can work with a framework of language, which is largely fixed in advance. Spelling error. No D at the end. In advance. But all the activity may be conducted with little understanding of target grammar. Okay. Grammar is prominent in the text, but not necessarily prominent in the student's response to the text. This is structuring for the learner activity as learners work around the target grammar. Okay, so they're using the target grammar or the phrase in this particular example. They're using it. Would you like to? Okay, but they don't really completely understand what everything means. Okay, so like this, yeah. Come to lunch. Would you like to come to lunch? They're just saying it out. Okay. Would you like to come to my house? Yeah. They're just saying it out. They may not understand what it means. It's kind of like tam tita tam titi tam tam. Okay. But it's not completely like that because here we're trying to extend it a little bit, and this is only one part of more parts of teaching grammar, more comprehensive. Okay. So this is structuring for the learner activity as learners work around the target grammar. And they don't really kind of like completely understand the meanings, etc. This kind of activity is also not enough. We need to deploy grammar flexibly, combining elements from the grammar and lexis in productive ways. We need activities that involve the active manipulation of language. Okay, so where they think about how to use it, the students themselves think about how to use it. Here, we're not really getting them to think about how to using it. That's why it's what structuring for the learner. Okay, what we want is structuring by the learner. Which require students to not only be active, but also be actively involved with the target language. Okay. So although these activities may sometimes seem brief, they cannot be successfully completed without real thought. So thinking is important. That's what we want. We want our students to be thinking about what they are saying, whether what they're saying is what they really want to say, what it means, etc. Okay. However, teachers cannot. Okay. So let's take a look at maybe this could be an example of by the learner. Okay. Which activity involves structuring for the learner and which activity involves structuring by the learner? Let's take a look. Yeah? This is activity 1. Okay, take a look at it. I'll take a break for a while. Okay, just take a look and try to answer and maybe also give an example why. If it is structuring by, the students will have to make some kind of a choice. They will have to kind of like think about what is appropriate. If it is structuring for, then the thinking is not as much. They're just kind of like, focusing on the structure, yeah, and kind of like repeating or something like that. Okay, so take a look at activity 1 and activity 2. Okay, this time I'm going to call someone, yeah, because when I don't call someone, nobody answers. Okay. So, who should I call? Yasin, what do you think, Yasin? Which one is more structuring by the learner? Which one is more structuring for the learner? It's kind of like, once again, a continuum. Okay. So if we say one is structuring by the learner, the other is structuring for the learner, and they're somewhere on that line. which one is structuring, more structuring for the learner, which is more structuring by the learner? What do you think, Yasin?
The first activity. The
Tak
first
dengar lah.
Huh?
Tak dengar.
Hello? Hello?
Yeah, not loud enough.
First. The first activity, Doctor.
The first activity, yeah. What do you think?
Is it
This is more
for learner, I guess?
Okay.
For learner?
for the learner. Okay, so this is more by the learner. Okay. Umaira, what do you think? You have a reason, Suhail? Yasin, sorry. You have a reason why you chose that?
Because for the first activity, like student have to write something or answer something on that. I think that's
Okay. So you're saying that it's for the learner. Okay. Umaira, what do you think?
I'm still brainy. I think
They are suddenly very quiet. Is something wrong with your microphone?
one by.
Iliana.
Yes,
Umaira.
Doctor.
Yeah, Iliana, what do you think?
I would like to try. I think the first one, activity one, is structuring by learner, and activity two is structuring for the learner.
Why? Why do you think so?
Because in activity one, it involves more thinking, and it needs for the learner to know first it needs the learner to know something beforehand. Meanwhile, in activity two, it is a drilling activity, so they need to think of maybe the pattern first, and they structure it by themselves. That's my opinion.
Okay. Okay, I would agree with you, Iliana. Yeah, Iliana, I would agree with you. This one, when you look at it closely, actually, when you think of it, we're in Melbourne, in Australia, right? If you just have the question, you can have what is Melbourne, right? And then the answer can be it's a city. But because the answer is also given, then the student has to think, oh, okay, the answer is in Australia. So he's asking about a place, right? A location. So it must be where, because where is about the location. So the student has to think, which is what is the appropriate, you know, WH word that can be put here. Okay, so there's more thinking involved here. So because of that, I would think that this is more structuring by the learner, yeah? Because the learner will have to think more, right? Okay, the learner will have to think a lot more. Whereas here, this is more structuring for the learner. Okay, so because it's a drill activity, yeah, this is a drill activity. So drill activities tend to be more structuring for the learner. The teacher gives them this format or this pattern, and then the students don't really have to think that much about it. They recognize the pattern, they just continue on with the pattern. Okay, so it was like, look at my watch, it was secondhand. Was it? It doesn't look secondhand. Okay, then it goes down. Look at my shoes, they were secondhand. And then were they? They don't look secondhand. You know, and so on and so forth. Okay, so not as much thinking compared to here, right? So this is a more a structuring by the learner activity. This is more a structuring for the learner kind of activity. Okay, so can you see the difference? Yeah, I hope you can see the difference. So the point that Bedstone is trying to make is that when you teach grammar and you get them to use the language or use the grammar point, you can think along the lines of who is doing the thinking. Are the students doing the thinking? If they're doing the thinking, then probably it'd be good for them when they want to pick up the language. But they will still need some kind of activities like this to get them a little bit more comfortable, maybe with the language or with the structure. Okay. So once again, this is structuring by the learner, whereas this is structuring for the learner. Okay. Both has its place. Okay. But as teachers, we need to know. We need to know what are we doing. Okay. We need to know that, okay, we're doing noticing type activities, but we know that some noticing type activities, the teacher does everything. Okay. Some noticing type activities, the students start thinking. Okay. So that's what we need. Yeah? We need to have the difference, be aware of the distinction. Okay. This one is a bit not, that's not so clear. So I don't think we'll look at this. You can take a look and try to answer it on your own. Okay. It's not very clear. And this is also another activity. Okay. This is also not very clear. Let me see whether I can make it bigger. Okay, so this is kind of interesting. We all like activities with all this, pictures. And unfortunately, this is a true story in January, etc., etc. Okay, there is a list of what's this? In this, which tells the events of the story. Look at the pictures and put the verbs or verbs, yeah, in the right order. So kind of like, when you have all this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, you kind of like have to think of how to arrange them. Not all of these activities are structuring for, structuring by kind of activities, but for teaching grammar. But sometimes we can have a lead one activity that makes it more interesting. Yeah. So here is a list of verbs in the past continuous, which describe the scene of the narrative. Look at the pictures and put the verbs in the right order, better than A to D. Okay, so was waiting, were living, okay, was working, and was playing. Okay, so what's the right order here? Was waiting, which one comes first? Was waiting, were living, was working, was playing. Anybody? Suhail.
Yeah. I think that was playing comes first. Then
Was playing.
uh, it was playing. Maybe it was
What comes
waiting.
last? What comes last?
We're leaving, I guess.
Yeah, were living, right? Okay.
Maybe.
So, okay, number 3, now complete the story about, this is basically fill in the blanks kind of thing. Okay, Mr. Bruin or Mrs. Bruin was pulling a number or a letter. Oh, okay, sorry, about Mrs. Bruin by putting a number or a letter into each gap. Okay, so on 14 January, etc., etc. So you put the number. Um, Mrs. Bruin, okay, was working in her garden and so on and so forth, right? Okay, so it's kind of like building up, and then you have a grammar question. What is the difference between the past simple and the past continuous? Okay, so these are all past simple and these are all past continuous. Okay, so kind of like, uh, you know, asking the students to make the distinction between the two based on the activity that they have completed. The question that I have here is it more structuring for or structuring by the learner activity? So I think it's got both. It's got both, right? It's got kind of like both. This is more for, right? Not so much thinking, but also there is some, and then you've got this part which is more structuring by the learner kind of activity, right? Okay. In fact, this is more perhaps a noticing type activity, yeah. And this is structuring for activity, more structuring for activity, okay, where you have steps, yeah. You have one step and you have another step, okay. So basically, okay, the continua for noticing structuring type activities, as I said, noticing for is on one end, noticing by on the other, and different kinds of activities will fall in this line, okay, whether it is closer to this or closer to that, okay. So the point once again is for us to realize and be aware that there are these kinds of activities, and we are aware that when we give our students activities, we know what our target is. The target is maybe for them to notice, and we're making it easy on them by, you know, helping them to notice, or that they will notice by having to figure things out on their own. Okay, because eventually the students need to do that. They have to go out on their own, and they have to uh, work on their own, and they have to do things on their own. They have to use the language on their own. Okay, so same thing with structuring. There's a for and there's also a by. Okay, and we're almost at the end. Okay, so once again, we or this presentation looks at product teaching, teaching grammar as product. Okay, what does it do? It provides a clear framework or language points to be covered, which can give a strong sense of direction. So in other words, we know that we want to teach, or we want to focus on um, present perfect and simple past. Okay, so when we declare something like that, we're basically very likely to be looking at product teaching. Okay, the activities that we make will focus on noticing or structuring. Okay, there is flexibility, as once the target form has been specified, the teacher can decide on his or her own how to teach it. For example, vary the amount of time given to noticing and structuring. Okay, the point that is actually being emphasized here is you have seen that this, yeah, you have seen this. There's so many different options. Okay, there's so many different options. Yeah, somewhere all along this line, you can make it more noticing by, you can make it more noticing for. Yeah, so awareness of that is, I think, already good. Okay, and then you can also make it the activity. You can make it more flexible by by putting in other variables like time, etc. Okay. So, but there are limitations of this kind of teaching. This is very traditional. And once again, you cannot guarantee that students will be able to use the grammar learned in real life communication, as the unpredictable nature of real life communication is absent. For example, time pressure, topics, and rules. Everything is kind of like controlled. Yeah, it's still controlled, even if it is structuring by or noticing by, it's still very much controlled. Yeah, and it focuses only on the product or the form or the structure. Okay, offers no explicit opportunity for proceduralization. Okay, this is what we want, right? We want automatic use of the language, right? They don't have to think so much about things. They can use it, zap once, and then, they say exactly what they want. Okay, so we need to also help our students reach this state where they proceduralize, automatic, everything is automatic. Okay, where knowledge becomes internalized and automatically deployable. That means it's internalized, it's part of you. You don't have to think too much about it. You can use it anytime you want, you know. Okay, you don't have to think, oh, should I be using past perfect or should I be using simple past? Yeah, that's what we are trying to help our students, that they don't have to think about it anymore. Okay, but of course, as a beginner student, they have to notice it. They have to notice the difference between the two. Yeah, whether you use the terms, okay, like in the articles that you have, where Hidaysi doesn't want to use, Betty Azhar doesn't want to use so much the terms. Whether you use the terms or you don't is up to you and the situation. Okay, but ultimately the goal is to help them become more able to use these structures automatically. Okay, yeah. So that's product teaching, yeah, and it's only the first stage. Okay, so you cannot end here because of the limitations of product teaching. Okay, because you're not helping them yet to be able to use the language. If you just do product teaching, if you just teach grammar as product, although you understand noticing for, noticing by, structuring by, but if that's all you do, still the student will not be able to use the language well. Okay, so we have to look at other things as well, and this is where teaching grammar as process and teaching grammar as skill comes in. Okay, and we're not going to talk about it today. Maybe we'll talk about it on Wednesday, and we'll see how things go. Okay, we're already in week 6, right? Week 6, week 6, yeah. And then after the break, you come back and do your micro teaching. Okay, so I'll stop here. Yeah, and if there are any questions or any comments, anything to clarify? Nurul Fatihah, everything okay?
Yeah, doctor.
Yeah, so what's the difference between structuring for, what's the difference between noticing for and noticing by the learner?
For the structuring for the learners, it's basically how the learner can um, utilize what the text is, but the structuring by the learners is how they notice terbalik. By the learners is how they utilize the text, but for the learners is how the text can make them notice what content in it.
Okay, still roundabout, a little bit roundabout, not very clear, but okay lah, in the end, it's by definitely will mean the responsibility is with the learner, right? For, it means that the teacher is doing a lot more for the learner, right? So if it's structuring for, then the teacher plays a bigger role, maybe, yeah. If it is structuring by, the teacher also has a role, but the students will have to do the discovery part, right? Okay, so it also applies for, yes.
Doctor, so
Yeah.
what if the student is like having a really low proficiency where by the learner is simply not working? So is it like better to use for the learner approach?
Right, okay, yeah. A very good question. That's where it's important for us to understand that uh, if the students are very weak, the tendency will be for a lot more of the for the learner activities. But you have to get from for to by, or you have to have eventually maybe a few activities where they will have to try to figure out on their own. Because if they rely completely on the teacher, how are they going to be independent users of the language? So they have to, sometimes also we must acknowledge that learning a language is done by the learners. The teacher cannot learn the language for the learners. So they have to be the ones who eventually or ultimately will have to think about how the language works and so on. Okay. So yeah, it depends how you use it and how much you use for and how much you use by and how you move from for to by. It depends on the situation, the learners, you know, their proficiency, etc. Okay.
Good.
Any other questions? Noor Fitri, you have any other question?
For now, no, doctor.
Okay, maybe I ask you a question, then you have to answer. What is a drill? Is it a for activity or a by activity?
A drill, I think it's a for activity.
Okay, yes, it's a for activity. Good
Yeah.
thing you answered correctly. Okay. Okay, so yeah, a drill is a for activity, right? Okay. Will tend to be a for activity. Okay, so let me just check on who's here and take some photos. Okay. Let's see where there are 44 of you. That means there are 5 missing. Yeah, there are 5 missing. Hold on. Today is the 26th. Okay, hold on. Smile. Okay, hold on. Page 2 now. Okay, page 2. Okay, smile. Okay. Hold on, let me see. I want to talk to somebody, but I don't think he is here. Okay. Hold on. Okay, so that's it. I sent a private message to someone. Yasin's chat is first activity. Which one is this in relation to what, Yasin? Can't remember. Okay, but the chat I didn't see that.
Oh,
Chat.
question that you asked me before.
Okay, okay, all right. I've sent a private chat to somebody. If you have not received it, then it wasn't you, and you can leave. Okay, because we're done. It's 12:15. I'm tired already. Okay, talking too much. Okay, so the others can leave. There's one person who I want to stay.
Thank you, doctor.
Thank you, doctor. Thank you, doctor.
See you on Wednesday.
Thank you, doctor.
Thank you, doctor. Doctor,
Okay.
I think there's no mistakes because I just thought that ESP1 is our assignment 1, but then it's not. It's
Okay, no mistake. No mistake. Okay, fine.
no mistakes. Thank you, doctor. Thank you,
Okay.
doctor.
Okay.